about being aware.
Yeah.
It's
Thanks for
about
bringing
being
that.
aware of the instinct more than necessarily trying to change it. Because I
Yeah.
think we're just not aware. It's so automatic
Yeah.
in your how you are. You
Yeah.
sometimes when you first hear it, you're like, it doesn't even make sense. Like you can't even like process it in here
Yeah.
until then then you go, whoa.
Yeah.
Once you become aware, then you start
Yeah.
to really notice it. So, and then you have, I think, a little more control over it because you're aware of it, not so much trying to manipulate it. So yeah,
Mhm.
I really hear what you're saying. I think the awareness is so, so, so important.
Okay, awesome. I love that you're tracking with me. And if you've just gotten to our conversation later or you're watching the recording, understand that what we're really seeing is our instincts as we have been able to test through lab animals the best as we can. And humans, we're seeing their biological drives, and we each have three of them, which we're going to go over. But we really do need to remember that these biological drives are subconscious and they're happening all the time, very quickly, even right now, even me planning this talk, everything about it, it's almost like that matrix where you're like, you know what? Like when we look really close, wow, these instincts are everywhere. But here's the blessing of it. They keep us alive. They keep us wired well, and they do the exact same thing for your spouse. And it is so beyond fast that you and your spouse don't even process how fast it's happening. But what I do want to tell you is in marriage, it can really trip you up if your spouse has a different instinct from you. And I can also tell you that your spouse doesn't mean to hurt you. This is not their way of getting you or making you feel bad. It's them thinking this is the best way I know how to survive. And it's you doing the same. So when they have something to teach you in their instinct, it's really lovely because you're going to be with them for a long time and we do rub off on each other. And I think that might even be why we picked our spouses, is because they had something we didn't have. Or even if you're both a social subtype, for instance, which we'll talk about instincts and subtypes. I'm going to use that for now interchangeably, even though they're a bit different. I think that what you're really going to learn is we're even different. Even if we have the same dominant instinct, we may use it differently. So you can still really learn from each other. And that's the cool part about marriage is it's long. It's a long, long, long process of shaping. But when we're demanding and controlling of one another to be like us, we're forgetting that their instincts are lying so low that it is not really a choice. And I do agree with free will and choice, but I want to help you to understand that it's perhaps more limited than we realize sometimes because of these early experiences we've each had, even prior to evacuating from that womb. So as we're learning from early work in those pre days when we're just forming. Okay, so let's look at the three instincts. We've already talked about how bullying can make things different and how when we bully each other as spouses, we might even be adding sort of a little T trauma, maybe not a big T trauma, but we're adding on some trauma to our spouse when we try to change their instinct. So we don't want to do that. But what are the three instincts? And this one is our first one we're going to talk about. And I think this is probably the lowest lying instinct because it's the very basic self-preserving instinct. And we use this money to make sure we're well. We use this instinct to make sure we're fed, that we have oxygen. And we all do it differently. Remember COVID, how everyone was trying different things. Do we use sanitizer? Is sanitizer going to be too much? We have some things we agree on, thankfully. Everyone agrees that rest is important. Everyone agrees that we need resources. But some people use those resources differently depending on their instinct. So these are just examples of self-preserving. And you could take it in very different directions. One person who's self-preserving could have lots of clothes and just feel like I need a lot of clothes because I feel we need clean items. And if I ever have a shortage, I'll always know that that's important to me to make sure I'm clothed. The very next person over may say, I'm self-preserving and I spend almost no money on clothes. So just understand it's more of you finding an emphasis here versus how the behavior is shaped. And then after we talk about the other two, I'll ask you which one you think you are. And if you're with a partner, I'll ask you which one you think your partner is. Now, if you're the sexual instinct, that one-to-one, you use this instinct to secure that bond a lot in all your one-to-one bonds and to really be creative. It's an instinct that helps us to create life. this is how the species is propagated. And it helps us to find that sexual love, that partnering. And you may have seen, I know I live in Florida and we have, it's spring right now. It's always spring here in Florida, sort of, but like I watch the birds just, basically peacocking. I watch them as they're on the lake and they're just spreading their wings wide to say, I'm showing you my sexual instinct. And we also see this in humans when we put earrings on or perfumes, and we want people to feel that we're virile. And of course, I could go on all day about how we differ as men and women, but suffice it to say that sometimes men will really like it if a female partner is projecting a lot of need in this area. And females more find that aversive if they see a man overdoing here because it feels unsafe. So there's a lot tracking back biologically for all of us too in this. And it's a good instinct. Just as that self-preserving is a good instinct, so is this one. And so we really celebrate this with you, and we understand why, if this is you, that you're here, because E&M is sort of built on this instinct in a sense, because we really know that this is an important space to build. It's about that intimacy. And I love that. And of course, just as the self-preserving could be overdone, this can be overdone. And there's a lot of ways, and we talk about that sometimes in more depth. But this is the final instinct. And it really is the pièce de résistance of instincts, because when we've done good self-care, when we've done good relational care, now we get to show up to the world, which so desperately needs it. Because as you're probably realizing now, if you're not already familiar with instincts and you're coming at this from the first time, then you realize, oh man, like if we're not doing well with the other two, we're not going to be very good socially. If we're not refreshed personally, if we're not taking good care of ourselves with our, close bonds and our attachment, which we need for survival, then showing up socially is sort of a moot point, and we're going to show up socially in a very callous, unfriendly, or unhealthy way otherwise. But what you use this social instinct for is to connect yourself to community work in groups. And so I gave some examples here. We have political affiliations here, school, churches, CrossFits, work, friends, anything that you find identity in as a group. And some of us love this, and there are good reasons. If this is your social instinct, that's amazing, because you care about helping people, you care about helping the world, and you're putting yourself out there in a vulnerable way, but you also may connect with that as a very safe place, because maybe at home it isn't so safe. Or maybe at home it wasn't so safe growing up from the womb up. And so you have found solace in social, whereas somebody else would say, yeah, it wasn't safe growing up. So I found solace in my one-to-one bonds, because I had a wonderful, for example, aunt who helped me growing up and showed me that, and we had a great bond. Or I was really introverted and I felt like my family or my community wasn't very safe. So maybe you had a self-preserving bond. And that is, of course, going to happen with your spouse too. And one of the first things I want you to do is talk about this together. And that's why Jen shared in the Zoom chat a freebie for you to be able to do that, to be able to take that home and say, let's look at this. And we even give you a bit of a ranking system to see how high is it for you. But before we get into instincts in marriage, go ahead and write in the Zoom chat if you have an awareness for your own preference for instinct. So if you find yourself as that social instinct, you could put an SO or social. If you find yourself to be strongest in the SX, put that or write it out, or the SP for self-preserving. But tell us which one you think you're strongest in. If you feel like it, you could even tell us your order, and that's sometimes called your sequence or your stacking order. And then you can also tell us if you want where you think your spouse or partner is if you're partnered, so that we can have a sense for some of the partnerings and the pairings that we see out there. And I like how Tessa started us out here to say, yeah, I know mine. I know that I'm an SX2. That's my focus, is I'm a type 2 on the Enneagram, but I have that 1-to-1, and that my partner is a 5. And I believe you said SP. Is that right, Tessa? Okay. Yep. So your partner loves to have a self-preserving influence. And so sometimes we come into marriage and we make fun of our spouses and we're like, you're so bad or wrong for loving this. But when we're healthy, we can say, this is a form of survival for you. And it was probably started long before we ever met. And that is so cool that we can know this about each other. So now we can support each other in a different way, because usually there's a bit of hostility around somebody's difference from you, because you're like, I'm sorry, that is not the way to survive. Um, and they're like, I'm sorry, it is the way to survive. And so a lot of people don't know that, quite honestly, this can be bigger than your Enneagram types together. And I really can't emphasize that enough. I know that Jen and Kirsten, and as Tessa's becoming one of our coaches here with me, they can totally emphasize that, right, guys? So I love reading these. And while I catch up on these, are there any questions or comments that anybody wants to make before we talk a little bit more about instincts in marriage?
I think an important thing with social too is that doesn't mean you're a social person. It doesn't necessarily mean that, like, some people are like, well, I'm not, like, my daughter is a 4 and she's like, well, I don't really like being social. I'm not really comfortable in groups. You cannot be comfortable in groups and still be a social. It's that you're aware of groups, that you have a longing for groups. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a social person. So I think it's important to kind of know the Enneagram definition of that word is slightly different than it doesn't mean that you're out partying and talking to people all the time. You may not really do that necessarily, but you would like to, or you're aware of that. So you're still could be a social as your main subtype.
I love that.
I found that a
love-
lot in my work, that I have to talk to people about that
Mm.
distinction between that word, how we associate that word, and Enneagram uses it slightly differently.
I like how you're saying that. So you're reminding people that the social instinct can look, just as I said, self-pres can look very different. You're saying it can look very different. I love that. Any other questions out there that people have, or comments they want to make about subtype in their relationship and how it's affected them? Tessa.
I was just thinking about the instincts this weekend and doing some research. And one thing I was thinking about in my family is I have 2 daughters and, of course, my husband. And I was thinking about the fact, am I social? Because I do like to be in groups and et cetera. But when I looked at my main core relationships, I want a one-to-one relationship with each one of them. I am not looking at the collective of my family as much as how am I doing with this daughter or my husband. And it's that one-to-one. And that helped me, because there are some people that are very family driven, even in their unit of family, but I'm not as much. I am in that one-to-one. So that clarified it for me that no, I am definitely the sexual one-to-one.
Oh, that is great clarification for people today trying to figure it out. Because everyone has a different story. And if anyone else wants to share their story briefly, this is a good time to say, I have another example. Anybody want to do that? And just put a thumbs up on your thing here on or in the chat if you want to at any time. Okay, Bonnie, go ahead. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I didn't, until I learned about subtypes, it was really hard to understand how 2 people of the same type can be so different. And my best friend and I are both married to 5s, but
Mm,
they're different subtypes
wow.
and different people, of course.
Yeah.
But even it took us time to even really get they were both 5s because they're so different.
Yeah.
But her husband is serious self-pres and my husband is one-to-one. And but also the other side of it, I've always wondered, how can you be a self-pres 7? And now listening to you for a long time, because I'm a 7, but I'm social. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, she still has the social side, kind of like that other lady just said, but she needs to retreat and she needs to, like have those other things that are self-pres, but there's still a lot that comes out looking social. So I think if you don't know about typing people,
Mhm.
learning more about instincts helps, like the typing, because there's so much, the main type matters, but that the instinct matters so much too.
Yeah, you bring out a great point that I didn't share to get nuanced, but I think it's worthy to really share, Bonnie. And that's that when we are attacked in our main instinct, it starts to show up in marriage with some either passive aggressive or more aggressive language and speaking. And so people really wonder, how does it really intersect with marriage? And that's what we learned. And even through the mice study from instincts all the way to prefrontal cortex, they realized that they could really figure out a way that when their instincts were attacked, they didn't have that, want to like hurt another creature. Like they did have the drive aggressively, but they were able to prevent them from actually acting on it. And that's the cool part about these processes. How much more in humans do we have that? Like, we may feel threatened sometimes in marriage, but we usually won't act it out because of this area in our brain called the PAC. But what will happen and could happen is certain areas of our brain might stop growing. We might feel a death, like you attacked me, I'm going within, or you attacked me and I'm not going to hit you, but I'm going to be aggressive because you just attacked my most critical line of defense. And you can probably, if you're partnered, remember a time when your spouse, probably unintentionally, attacked you in this way, or maybe intentionally, because marriage is long and maybe sometimes they've been in a really unhealthy place. But these are memories for you, core memories in your marriage that have made you feel maybe even more resolute in your standing of, I need this, and you must understand that about me. And I think that's okay for you to bring back after this training to your partner to say, this is really important to me. And when it feels challenged or threatened, I feel aggressive on the inside. Oh, I may not act on it. I probably won't, but it hurts. And that's vulnerable to say that. And trust me, it took me a long time to say that. It took me even a long time to figure it out because, as somebody said, I am so social. But to realize that I'm just a 7 who can burn out more quickly than others, it's like I definitely needed some balance within those instincts. And I needed to know that, yes, I get that the social is sort of that highest instinct, but you also need to have a balance. So we'll talk about how to do that briefly together, because I definitely don't want you to leave this training thinking you just need the one instinct. I want you to really let your spouse influence you. So in marriage, I'm just reminding you here in this slide that while one of them is, or two might be kind of your active instinct, you probably also have one that's quite repressed. And these could be total shadows for you where you're like, I don't use that one at all and I don't even see the need for it. Or it could just be a blind spot where you're like, I see it, but I have to intentionally see it. And that's, I'm sort of in the middle of those two with my social instinct. I'm like, I see it. I know it's a shadow, but it still feels sometimes like unnecessary. And that's something that I challenge every single day. So you might be in that space too. And I don't know where you're at, but I want you to have a sense for just thinking together with me, which one of yours might be repressed. And maybe it's even 2 of them. Maybe you're like, I am so social that I forget self-care and I forget my one-to-ones. That is just okay, because you know what it tells me is that you've had some trauma in your life. That's huge. And I'm just going to share that, and I'll share a brief story from this weekend. But when we balance our instincts as more evenly, we may experience the following benefits. We find life comes together with less stress because we're not overemphasizing. We find that our relationships are healthier, and we find that we're less caught in traumatic patterns that were overemphasized in the past by necessity. And I'm just going to come back to you briefly to say, I already asked this question, which one are you, working with the most? But something we even noticed this weekend was we had a super social weekend, lots of performances for our children. If any of you have been through that stage or are in it, or have nieces or nephews in it, you know how it gets in spring. And so we had a lot of social time. And then after our time together, some of us were just tired, and others of us probably wanted to hang socially with other people. And my husband spews out to this other family, he's very socially wired. He goes, we should get together for ice cream afterwards. And it was like, I had just said that my 9 needed to pick because she was sort of like, had a really big night. And he picked the family that she does not care for the daughter. She loves her and she tries to, like, she sees it. She's like, she's a good woman, young woman, but she's not my person. And so it was just an interesting observation, but we were able to have the instinct talk on the way to the restaurant. And I had said, I'm self-preserving, so I tried to get out of it right away. I was like, we're going to dinner first. So maybe next time, or like, maybe we can catch up with them later, and like, if we would have, it would have been like, I would have had time to coach my daughter. Let's just get a quick ice cream. But he was like, oh, okay. They were like, let's go out to dinner and let's go here. So we pulled it back as best as we could. We tried to let her choose as best as we could. And R9 did voice things. She goes, I said, what about Culver's? And she goes, I don't know if you guys know this Burger King, but she's like, oh, that's a step down. I'm like, oh, okay, comfort type, because 9s are comfort types. Let's try to come back. So we tried to balance. And my husband said, he goes, I am so sorry, you guys. I am so socially wired, but I was aware of it. So I was trying to do just a quick ice cream. And so then, when mom said that, it's like we got stuck with dinner. And of course we were laughing. That was good. We did good, because I was like, oh, don't blame me. So we were like, honestly, like, this is a good family. Like, let's do this quickly. And dad is very apologetic. And he said, social is my wiring. It's my safe place. It's automatic. And I am so sorry. And everybody could relax then. And my daughter sat with somebody she really enjoyed, and everyone had a good time. This is a very small example. As you know, it gets a lot bigger in marriage. And so you have to be brave to take tiny baby steps like that, because that was probably even hard for him to just say. And we were like, yay, you acknowledged it, you owned it. And then I was able to voice, and this is very good too in marriage, to be humble. I said, it's taken me a long time to get here, but I go, guys, I have the opposite thing. I would have been fine going home and reading a book by myself. So I don't want to be here as the queen while dad is bad. I'm just, we're all different. We have all these 5 people in this community here that we're all different. So let's work together. And so that's what it's more like. It's never this perfect answer that your instinct gets the full just because you're like, that's my survival pattern. When you're in community with others, there's a titration happening of you guys taking a lot of deep breaths and trying to do the work with grace as much as possible together. Also, something we say in our family, and I hope you'll bring to your marriage, is, we are hardwired well. So even if you find yourself in a situation that's uncomfortable to you, you'll probably be able to make it. And we think about people in, war situations, they do make it. Your body will go into a responsive situation, but ideally you're trying to bring a little of both, a little challenge as well as a little comfort. So I'm going to take a couple questions. Feel free to share a story or two. We have a little extra time, but first and foremost, which one are you likely to avoid in terms of a blind spot? And go ahead and share that in the chat if you're comfortable. Now, I just want to briefly let you know there's help for you to have that wise, creative, and compassionate balance. So my best advice for you here is just scaling back a bit. Maybe you're that type who wants to have just a one-on-one connection all weekend, and you're like, we worked hard in community all week, and I just want us to have the weekend to relax, to sleep in, to have sexual intimacy, to have a date night. And your partner's like 100% social or 100% self-pres, and they are thinking of a totally different weekend. So I don't want you to forget that that's important too. I want you to scale back a little bit and say, honestly, that's probably even idealistic for me to think I want that for the whole weekend. I might even get tired of it if all we did is stare into each other's eyes all weekend too. So it's a bit of laughing at yourself, like, I don't fully want it, I just crave it. But when I get enough of it, I'm okay. And then the other way you can grow in your instincts is to gently add in the other 2. And I just said, take tiny tweaks and test. Yes, I overly got into alliteration there intentionally, but I was just like, it's just a quick way for us to test to see, did we do a good job? And that is in marriage. Sometimes you might say to your spouse, all right, I'm going to try to lean into your instinct. And often we give similar advice to type 5s, for instance, because we're like, 5s, get in the world more, try to do more. But sometimes it doesn't work out. It's not always rose and sunshine just, because we've tried. Sometimes we're like, this is exactly why I'm the sexual dominant or the social dominant or the self-pres dominant. And it was a fail. And so then you can go back and look again that, it's a fail forward. It's learning. It's trying. And so don't make a promise to your spouse that you can't keep. Like, yeah, I learned today that I was a self-pres instinct, so I'm going to stop being that. I'd rather you say, I'm learning how important and meaningful this is for us to be balanced here as a couple, to add in all three of the instincts and to not really let the blind spots in as much. And so I'm trying to tweak and test, and you might notice me making some different moves in our marriage because I'm taking really little baby steps. And even if your spouse doesn't notice, it's nice for you to tell them you're trying. Because for me, one thing that my husband and I both have a lot of trauma, like a lot. And so when I make a move out of self-pres to social, sometimes he doesn't even notice it until I tell him. And that's very helpful when I tell him, because then he can have some positive feelings toward me, toward love. And he's like, oh, thank you. So be sure you're active, not in a braggy way, but just like, something I don't know if you noticed or not was that I tried, and I see somebody saying I'm low on sexual, like, hey, I tried to initiate, and that was hard because usually I'm not an initiative person with this area. I'm usually just a responder. And that is a classic female and male difference too, just in the sense of the anatomy. Of course, that's going to differ for some people, but I like how Rachel reminded us of that you got a little boost now and then. And I love that as a mom, you really needed to lean in on your self-pres more, which also happened with me. Anyone else want to share a story briefly, or ask a question about instincts, or make a comment otherwise? And I'm just reading comments as I see this too. And Jen, you can let me know if you have any questions or comments too, or anything that you see.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, sorry. You started first, Jen. Go ahead.
okay, you can go after, I promise. I just wanted to add a quick comment. When I was first learning about instincts, I really appreciated using the Enneagram Glow Relationship Planner. And this is not a plug that Krista told me to do, but I will say that in this, I will post the link to it in case anyone's interested in purchasing it. And what it does is it goes through week by week, you plan out your weeks and you plan them actually according to your instincts. And this was really useful for me in the beginning because I'm self-preserving dominant. And for me, self-preserving actually includes my family. I don't know if this is normal, but I think during COVID, I kind of imagined us all in a bubble and we're all inside the bubble. I tend to really repress the social, my husband's social, so he helps me a bit, but I find if I balance and I get my self-preserving time and then my one-to-one time, then I actually have energy for social, which I encourage my clients to do in that order, is very useful. But in the planner, it actually has you schedule out according to your instincts. And so what I would notice when I sat down with my husband to do the planner is we would say like, okay, we have, this church event on Sunday or this kid's birthday party on Saturday, and he would try to plan another social thing on Friday, kind of like what Krista was talking about with her social hub. We talk about this a lot. And I was like, no, that's enough for me. If you want to go do the social thing on Friday, you can do that. But I see right now that that is enough for me. And what can I do to balance? And so I'll say, okay, I know I have space and energy for a date night for the sexual instinct, but I know I can't do another social thing. So it was good for me to start thinking about those pieces. And now it's kind of ingrained that I don't have to necessarily write them out, but it's useful as you move forward. So any questions on that, please ask me or Krista, but I think it was useful for me in the beginning.
Ooh, I love that. I love you reminding us of the richness of the family dynamic, and Rachel did too. The more people you add in, you might see, oh, instinct shift, or I'm close to my nieces and nephews and I seem to pull them into it as well. All kinds of things like that. Kirsten, what were you going to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, it's kind of funny because I'm the opposite. I'm the social and my husband's a self-pres. So I'm the opposite of Jen on that degree. But I was just going to say for my husband as a self-pres, and I saw that Bina was kind of commenting on this. At first, he did not like that he was self-pres. Like he kind of took it a little bit personally, like, well, I don't just always think of myself. And then when he realized that he does, it's very subtle things like if he's in the car and he doesn't like the song on the radio, he'll just switch it to another station. If he is cold, he'll just go turn the heat up. He doesn't ask anyone else like how they're feeling or, what they, and I'm social. Our son who's 18 lives with us is social. So we notice, and plus we're dependent types. So we notice what's going on and he just goes to himself. But now what I really resonated with, Krista, was you talking about humor. And we were talking about this in our last training as well too, that you can bring so much beautiful lightness and humor into your marriage and your family using these tools, because now I can say to him, dude, a little self-pres there. Like, could you ask me, like, why am I suddenly freezing? You turned the air conditioning colder and you didn't even pay attention to what was going on or turn on the ceiling fan. And now he'll, as an aide, of course, who has anger issue too, but now he'll just laugh. We find humor and he's like, oh gosh, I did it again. I'm sorry. I need to pay more attention. And then it doesn't end up in hurt feelings. It doesn't end up in arguments. It, we're more transparent with each other. Even you telling the story about your daughter and the 9 and being aware of other people. It's just so beautiful. It's such a beautiful tool to bring so much more harmony in to your life. And in my marriage, knowing these instincts and that I'm social and he maxes out when he's like, I don't want to be with all your family. I don't want to have another big gathering. Enough's enough. Like I need to have my alone time. And I've come to honor that and not take that personally as well. It's just so valuable. I love about instincts. I think they're so important and they really have made so much difference in my marriage, like hugely. And because my self-pres is the bottom and I'm a 2, anybody 2s out there, if you want to talk about this, that actually makes it even 2s tend to not be very good at self-care anyway. And then if your self-pres is on the bottom, that's a little extra. Thank goodness I'm married to a self-pres because that helps me to be pay more attention to my self needs because I'm not very good at that because that's definitely on my bottom. But yeah, I think humor is just, we all needs a little more humor in our life and to not take things so seriously. And that is one thing that Enneagram truly can do in your life and your marriage, to not have your heart hurt. Of course, I'm a heart type, but not have those feelings hurt because you're being more transparent and open and honest with each other in a non-judgmental way. And I love that about it so much. It's my favorite thing.
Oh, I'm so glad. She is such a cheerleader for these instincts because they matter so much. And it's harder to explain 9 types to people sometimes as friends. You don't even have to use the word Enneagram if you're ever just like, hey, we have 3 instincts in marriage. I shared that recently with a police officer who went to my church and he was like, I've never heard that. And that makes so much sense. And he was like, I think I tend toward the self-pres. And so I think that it's nice for you to share this with people that you care about if you feel like it would be helpful for your relationship. And if you're like, this just confuses me and adds too much, that's okay too. You can come back to it later if it's ever helpful. But as you're hearing us say, it can be really beautiful as a family and a marriage tool, also to know where your shadows lie. As
it helps with parenting too, because you can be so much more kind to your children if their instinct is different than yours. That's made a huge difference in being a better mother as well too.
Yeah. Me too. And your instincts may shift a bit. I thought my entire family, and I've said it a lot on my podcast, was social, and that I kind of went towards self-pres more because of that. But my daughter, who's my same kind of tri-type, very similar to me, she recently said she's self-pres too. And the girls were out for ice cream the next night after that for more recitals with friends. And she came back, they came back together and I was happy. I was like, good to see you. It's only 10 o'clock. I thought you might stay out till 11 or something. And they said, no, I was done. And the 9 was like, I wasn't done. And so I was like, well, I know when you come up, I'm never going to see you. But it was like, we had to have a balance. And so she went out to dinner for her sister, but her sister had to come home early for her. So you see how it works with kids. You see how it works in marriages. And I hope you're excited to bring these tools home with you because they're beautiful, but you don't want to overwhelm your spouse. So if they don't want to do this with you, that's okay too. You can say, I'm just going to work on it individually. Trust me, there's plenty for you to work on. And as I said, you might need some tweaks where you thought you could let go of a certain aspect and then you realize I was totally dysregulated. I needed a bit more of that. And try to give grace to your spouse and to yourself as you guys are tweaking. This is a process we're still doing after years. So I love that we could chat about this together today. Any final questions before we exit our meeting about instincts? Yes, go ahead, Sue.
So I just absolutely love this. I am completely the social, I love the brainstem thing because I think I came out of the womb planning a party, you know, and let everybody in the room know it. And that balance is just so important. Knowing my husband so much better, he is a counterphobic 6 self-pres. So it has been, wow, a lot of awareness and a lot being able to work on that. But I just wanted to comment on that. I love that you have this planner, even though I hope that I can find it once I get it. So being able to have that planner is, he's going to love that, and being able to see that balance. So tell me a little bit more about how you use the planner.
Well, I was going to say one thing that I ended up needing to do is it's a PDF download, but what Jen helped to add to our process with the planner is that I really liked printing it for myself, but as a 7, it was like, you know, I just really even doing the printing of it was fine, but then getting it into the binder was messy. So Jen now, and you can raise your thumbs up here, Jen, I think, because there's a few Jens in here, but she does a good job if you ever want to get it bound, and she does it at cost. She's a type 1. So she's like, here's how much it costs me to print it. And she bought us a printer for E&M, you know, and I mean, like I bought it, but like, you know what I mean? Like she made sure I was using my money well. And so she has a way to print it out if you want, and then you just leave it in a place, like any good habit that you're forming, you leave it out in a place that is, you know, maybe a sacred place. Like, I always put everything I love on this dresser and I see it every day, or I put it in our car because we ride to work together, or we use it every Saturday on our date night. So just keep it in a place that is good. Or if you're just absolutely disciplined about using it on your phone, you can do that too, and you don't even have to print it. But that's how I use it, is once a week with my husband on a date night or otherwise. If it's a stressful topic like conflict month, I don't use it on the date night as much. But once in a while, we still bring it on a date night because we're like, you know what, our kids aren't here and we do need to hash something out. But generally, I like to remind everybody here that your one-to-one date night should be a time of low stress. And so you don't want to do a planner every single time you're on a date. That's just going to make no one want to take the date night. And she has that's last year's cover, but can you show the inside too to see how?
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to go grab it real fast. Yeah, this is last year's cover because we kind of are using it in tandem with last year, but
which I
I mean,
totally get.
it is huge. I mean, you really get a lot of resources, and there's a lot of learning in it too, which I really appreciate. And we go through month by month topics, which if you follow along in our Facebook group, our Instagram, you'll see those monthly topics. Right now we're in spirituality. So it goes through a little bit of that, but the instincts is throughout. So that has been really helpful in the planning. So if you're interested in this, you can always, I'll put my email in the chat. You can send me an email and I'll help you to get yourself a copy like this, or you can just go to the link I sent and you can get a PDF version and make your own if you want.
Yes, thank you so much. And honestly, that's my favorite part, is asking Wes every week, how are we balancing our instincts? And lastly, I'll just say something that's beautiful to me is I'm seeing the self-pres come out in him. And I don't cry often, but I could over that, because I have seen that he's needed the social because he had unhealthy, they had their own trauma, but his parents were not able to raise him very well. And they did the best they could. And he came out to be a type 1, through and through. And he's like, this is why I became a 1, because they were in trauma. But just for me to see that he's allowed to take care of himself, and he was allowed to set our temperature last night, I was like, oh my gosh, he set the temperature on the thing. And he felt safe to just say, I like cool air, because he grew up with very, very warm air all the time. And it was very loving for me to you're allowed to be self-pres too, Wes. So do know that's a gift to your spouse. And when you start to see these little ways you're rubbing off on them, it's some of the most sacred work you can do in marriage. So thanks for including your email there, Jen. I'm going to hop off the call, but before we leave, I'll just show you that we have these ways you can connect in case you're newer to E&M. You can visit the Facebook group where Jen spends a few days every single week, the Instagram where I make posts, my daughter and I, every single week, and then the collective, which is meetings like this once a month. is open again to the public on the 19th. So if you're like, I need times like this where I can talk and grow and just have connection with other people, not just podcasts, this is the space for that. It's our membership group. We also give you extra podcasts on Wednesdays that are really deeper teachings. So that's really the way that we like to help. And it's the best way I can come together socially with my people. This is a group I like. I almost consider it self-pres of it's other people who love the Enneagram. So I feel like you guys are my safe place. And I'm like, Wes, when you have all your people at church, like I have my ENMers. So thanks guys for helping me to have just the joyful experience of being social and improving our marriages and also learning self-care together, because it's just a joy. So thank you very much for being here today. It was my pleasure to see you, and I hope to see you again. Okay, bye guys.
Thank you for your time, Krista. Bye, everyone.